Today's guest is Adam Carroll, who is a master of money. We're going to talk about building a bigger life, not a bigger lifestyle. He has some amazing insights to share. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today, we're going to focus on mindsets and being intentional as we talk with Adam. Before we get to that, I want to talk about letting go and start with a story. Two monks were on a journey, and they came to a river where they met a beautiful young woman dressed in expensive clothes. She was afraid of the current and afraid of ruining her lovely clothing, so she asked the monks if they might carry her across the river. The monks had taken a vow not to touch women. However, the older brother didn't hesitate. He quickly picked up the woman on his shoulders, carried her across the river, and set her down on the other side. She thanked him and went on her way. The monks resumed their walk, the older one in perfect harmony and enjoying the beautiful countryside, while the younger one grew more and more upset and distracted. After hours of quietly fuming over the situation, he challenges the elder monk. We are taught to avoid contact with women, and there you were, not just touching a woman, but carrying her. The older monk looked at the younger monk with a loving smile and said, "Brother, I set her down on the other side of the river. You're still carrying her after all these hours. What are you carrying around that you should let go of?" Today, we're going to chat about a lot of ideas that may not be relevant in today's world, and maybe we need to let go of them. Today's guest is my good friend Adam Carroll, who has spoken to over 500,000 people on mastering their money. In addition to 2 TEDx talks, he's created a documentary movie to help students stay out of college debt. Adam is helping to ensure our youth build a bigger life and manage their money. Let's meet this amazing dad. Welcome to Richer Soul, Adam. It is great to have you joining us today.
Rocky, it is an honor to be here with you.
It's all my honor. So let's start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, I love this question because when I grew up, I had this perception that I was from an affluent family. And my parents laugh about it to this day because I know there were weeks and months that they put groceries on a credit card. Unbeknownst to me at the time, my dad would get a Christmas bonus at the end of every year. Later in life, probably in my 20s, he confided in me that the Christmas bonus almost always went to pay off his credit card, which had been accumulating throughout the year. It really did 2 things, Rocky. Number one, I was left with this impression that we lived an abundant lifestyle because we really did. My dad was a very abundant thinker. My mom, on the other hand, came from a background of having lack in her life. And so I got the best of both worlds, where she wanted to be very cautious and he was like, oh no, we'll find a way to make it work. I think my real lessons I didn't learn until I was about 19 or 20, when my dad said, hey pal, any dime you receive from me from here on out, consider it a loan.
That's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah, it was. And at the time I thought, that was kind of harsh. I recall asking him for $40 to go out over the weekend with my friends. I was back from a weekend of college and I said, hey, Dad, can I get $40? And my dad was a master negotiator. So he would say, $40, what do you need $30 for? I'm not going to give you $20. Here's $10. And then as he's handing me the $10 bill, he said, what I just told you, any dime you get from me from here on out, consider it a loan. And I found out that earlier that day, he had gotten a bill for brakes on my mom's vehicle. My sister had called him to ask for money, and I had asked him for money. And I think we'd all just pushed him over his tipping point. It was like, no, you're not getting any more from me from here on out.
So it wasn't something that he had planted seeds as you were growing up saying, this is coming. It just was out of the blue.
It was out of the blue, although I will say that my dad was a really brilliant communicator as it related to money, in the sense that we knew years before we went to college that they were going to cover 100% of our first year, 75% of our second year, 50% of our third year, 25% of our fourth year. So we had a sense of how much money was there or what they would cover. I think we got older and he got a little wiser. And at some point he just said, these kids are going to get cut off and they need to be cut off sooner rather than later.
And I think that's a valuable lesson for parents. I think we think we're doing our kids a favor by giving them money and providing them a wonderful lifestyle, but I can tell you the outcome of that is usually not pretty.
Could not agree more.
So what are you doing differently to teach your kids about money?
Well, one of the lessons I gathered from my folks in terms of being open and honest about, where they sat is, with my kids, we're very forthright about income and about assets and about debts that we carry and debts we don't carry. I would say my kids are probably more aware financially than most kids the same age are. Part of the way we do that, Rocky, goes back to your comment about parents believe they're doing right by their children when they shield them from all of those financial woes and worries. And I believe that in our society today, we have conflated love and struggle. So we believe, or many will say or believe, I love my kids, therefore I don't want them to struggle. And in reality, if you get a family of kids who've never struggled before that then go out into the real world, they will soon learn what struggle is, only they'll learn it on a much, much larger scale from a financial perspective. So with our kids, we want them to struggle. The way we do that is we encourage them to make financial mistakes. And the way we do that is they are provided an allowance every single week. It's based on their age, and they are required to pay for certain things in their life. Those things are gifts when they're invited to a friend's birthday party. If they say, hey, can we go out for ice cream? My response is, I'll fly if you buy, meaning I'll drive you there, but you're paying for it. Donuts on Sunday morning. If they buy some school clothes, they have a budget, but anything over that budget, they're going to pay for. The reason I do that is I really want my kids to make financial decisions at a young age and make them in $5 and $10 increments, so that when they're faced with $1,000 or $5,000 increment, they actually make a very educated decision.
And that's quite wise. I think we've done something very similar. I think we lacked was we didn't put enough onto them, I think, in making some of the decisions that we could have probably given them more to handle on their own, and we did. But they are very money savvy. So at the end of the day, I'm happy with the results.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think lessons come in all shapes and sizes, right? And I know your daughter and I met your son. I think they're incredibly astute young people. Kudos to you and your wife on that one. I think that the lessons learned in small decisions, things like my daughter's, she's 15, she's saving for a car. Our philosophy is that the kids really need to have some skin in the game. They need to have some ownership. They need to take pride in ownership. So she's been saving money for the last several months, saving up for her goal amount. knowing full well that I'm going to match her dollar for dollar. So whatever she saves, I'm going to match her. We're very careful to use language like, I will match you dollar for dollar, not I'll pay half, you pay half. Because half of an amount, let's say she picks out a $5,000 car and she says, well, I only have two. Will you cover the rest? Then I'll pay you back. No, I will match you dollar for dollar what you save. And that's how we'll make that decision. The decision she's making is she's doing research and she's going to do the negotiation, and she's realizing how hard you have to work to save an amount of money to buy a car. And then she'll figure out how expensive it is to do repairs and insurance and all those good things. So lessons come in all shapes and sizes.
That they do. And it sounds like you are doing an amazing job with your 3 kids to make sure that they are money savvy.
I appreciate that. I hope so. I read an article one time, Rocky, that said that it takes 2 generations to create a Rockefeller type fortune. You have to decide, are you generation 1 or are you lucky enough to be generation 2? And I think that the bolt-on statement to that is that by generation 3, generally the wealth is squandered. I think that it's the lessons that we teach our kids that will keep family and generational wealth perpetuating. While my kids, they have a lot of what they want, they have what they need, certainly. But I also think that there are things they would love to have, they just don't have. What they do have is a really concrete understanding of why we do what we do and the long-term ramifications of that from a wealth perspective. So I'm hopeful for the future.
I totally agree with you, because I've seen that with my own eyes, in the sense that when my parents came here, they struggled, but they built a solid foundation for us. And I have done very abundantly. Knowing what you said, though, was if things followed the normal course of events, my kids would be a disaster. Right? Because that 3rd generation usually goes,
true.
When I look at, we have other family members and people that I've watched and seen, their kids are disasters. And by disasters, I mean disasters. Like no confidence, no job, a lot of trouble. Still on the parents' dole in their 20s and 30s, drinking, drugs, and all these kinds of problems. So I was very upfront. I was very intentional to make sure that we did not allow that next generation to slip. And so they live well below what they could have lived. And I don't think any of us have any regrets for it. And I know my daughter, she comes to me a lot and says, thank you. I didn't understand why you wouldn't let me watch certain TV. I didn't understand why you wouldn't let us drink soda or eat this crap food. And now she's like, I appreciate that you made us do that because now we get it.
Well, and this is such a great example, what you just described, of this idea of love and struggle. Because you love your kids, they have to struggle through those experiences of their friends going, you don't drink soda, or you don't have sugared cereal. As a kid, it's hard. Like, I get it. Our kids are in the same boat. We have family friends. You guys don't go out to eat every Friday and Saturday night? That's so crazy. And my kids, they're like, no, we love eating at home. We love being at home. I don't understand why we wouldn't do that more often. So I think what you just described with your kids is a great example of you love them and therefore they struggled through some things and now appreciate that.
Very true. And you know what? We were just out at dinner on vacation and we were at the beach. So we stayed at home. We cooked at home every day because we had the beach house, except I said, one night we'll go out and splurge. After that night, I showed them the bill. I said, we spent $240 on dinner tonight with tip. Was it worth it? Compare it to the rest of the week where we probably ate at home we probably spent maybe $350, $400 for all the rest of the meals that week. But and so you have to give them those choices and you need to help them connect the dots.
Definitely.
So you have an amazing podcast that I had the honor to be on, and it's called Build a Bigger Life, Not a Bigger Lifestyle. What does that mean?
Well, the saying came to me some time ago when, my background, Rocky, for your listeners to understand, is I came up over the last 15 to 16 years speaking on college campuses. And I had this message of there is a game that we all play with money. Any given point in time in our lives, we're either winning the game or we're losing the game. And in fact, my first book was called Winning the Money Game. It's a rule book for achieving financial success for young people. And when I went out and I taught that message to college students, what I found more often than not was there were students that would say, I'm so anxious to get out of school and get a good job so I can buy a new car and I can get a big house and I can do all the fun things that I want to do. And I said, beware that if you go out and you build a really big lifestyle for yourself, lifestyle being the clothes, the cars, the house, the apartment, all of that, dinners out, that's a really big lifestyle. And if you have a really big lifestyle, you'll have a really small life because you'll be working constantly to afford that which you thought you wanted. And you will eventually realize you didn't and you don't. So the whole goal of my programming became, hey, I want you to go build a big life, not a big lifestyle. The lifestyle will catch up over time, but it's more important that you have a big life, meaning you have time, you have relationships, you're allowed to give back, not necessarily that you are living paycheck to paycheck because you have paymented yourself into a corner. I think that's the big one. It's like if you're going to build a big life, not a big lifestyle, you have free time, you have flexibility, you have freedom, and you have ample discretionary income every month that allows you to do the things you want to do, not the things you have to do.
That's very true. There's a lot of people who are stuck in jobs because they've built a bigger lifestyle and now they can't walk away because they're trapped.
It's true. An aspect of our society that I know both drives the engine and it also keeps a foot on the brake all the time. But it is the idea that our entire society is driven on debt and that debt makes GDP grow. So that's a good thing. But debt also limits how well we live our life in some cases because we are paymenting ourselves into that corner so much so that we're not putting any money away for retirement. It's a scary, scary statistic. I think CNN Money came out and said that 63% of the American public doesn't have $500 in cash in case of an emergency. They would have to alter their lifestyle somehow in order to cover a $500 emergency. That's a problem. Part of that problem, I think, is the result of us buying into that banker's business model of, well, if I want it, I just borrow for 72 months to get that thing that I want.
72 months is a long time.
That it is.
Most people who buy cars at 72 months realize long before 72 months is over that they are no longer thrilled with that purchase decision.
Indeed, indeed.
And then unfortunately, they roll over the loan into the next 72-month loan. And it becomes a bigger issue.
Absolutely. And bigger and bigger and bigger over time. I had this conversation with a recent grad. She must have been 25. We were having this conversation about life wasn't what she thought it would be post-graduation. And I said, well, what did you aspire to? And she said, I wanted to travel. I wanted to see things that I'd never seen. I wanted to be on the road and be in a business or an industry that allowed me to go see the world. And I said, well, where are you at now? And she described her job and all of that. And I said, so let me ask you this. What keeps you from taking a period of time off and going and doing those travels? And her answer, Rocky, was, well, I just bought a new car and I bought a new couch and I have payments on those and I have to make those payments. When she said it, my initial thought was, oh, so if I'm hearing you correctly, you built a big lifestyle. And now you can't live the life that you want because the lifestyle is getting in the way. And I think that's the secret that I'm trying to unlock for people.
That is a dramatic mind shift change. I think too many people are stuck in the we have to do this and we have to do that. And when you do, you kind of get stuck. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I think there are more and more people now at least coming out and saying, don't do that. And hopefully that message continues to get out and we continue to make sure that people hear it. Because you don't have regrets not having all that stuff. You do have regrets when you're stuck and you don't have freedom. And that's what I think people just need to realize, that even though it feels exciting in the moment, over time, it creates much more in the way of regrets.
Two things come to mind on that statement, Rocky. One was a quote by Jim Carrey, who said, I wish everyone could have all of the fame and success and money that they wanted so they could understand that's not enough. That it's not about the money and the stuff, that you have to find happiness in where you are and who you're with and all of that. And the other was from an interview that I did on the Build a Bigger Life podcast with a musician by the name of Tim Rose. And Tim's a young guy, probably just 27, 28, somewhere in there. And Tim decided that music was his life. And he wanted to play music and do nothing but play music. And he lives on the island of Oahu and was living in an apartment, and the apartment cost him something like $2,200 a month, and it was a studio, and he had student loans and all this other stuff. And he listened to me on a podcast where I was talking about reducing debt and how to eradicate debt quickly. And so he made this rash decision that he was going to live in his van. He bought a van, traded his truck in for a van, converted the inside to sleeping quarters. And he now lives in his van, plays music 6 nights a week, has something like $3,000 or $4,000 extra every month in discretionary money, is blasting away all of his debt, and is prepping himself to go on tour and do the music scene that the way he really wants to do it. In the interview, he says this thing that I thought was super profound. He said, you have no idea how satisfying it is to know that all of your belongings fit in 92 square feet.
And I don't doubt that. I grew up with a very different mindset. And so we followed the American dream of the big McMansion and all those types of things.
Yep.
And thankfully, we stopped in the sense that we didn't keep going up the path like we should have. But there came a point a long time ago where we said, this stuff, it becomes an obligation. And we paid people to come take all the crap out of our house.
Right.
We still have crap in our house that I want to get rid of, but we're going in waves, little by little. But yeah, I totally get that. Now as I look at life and I think about it, I'm like, what do I really want? I'm like, let me have my nice big screen for my computer and a keyboard. And beyond that, I just need some very basic things. I envy that it was able to be smart enough to do that in his 20s.
2 things that come to mind on that note. One was one of my mentors is Jack Canfield. And Jack, at one point when I was talking to him, he said, Adam, here's the thing. When we start out in life, we want stuff. And I think that's a normal thing, right? We want to acquire. We have things we've always wanted that we start buying. And so we have stuff. And then we start making more money and we go, you know what? I want nicer stuff. So I start buying nicer stuff, bigger screen monitors. I buy, the new iPhone X as opposed to the old 4C or 5C that I had. And we get nicer stuff, nicer cars, nicer clothes, all of that. And then we have the nicer stuff and we're like, you know what? I just want different stuff. So I'm going to buy different, nicer stuff, and I replace that. And now I have all of that different, nicer stuff. And he said, and then you get to a point where you say, what I want things to be significant. And to your point, I would challenge your listeners to make a list of the 20 items they couldn't live without, collect those significant things, and everything else that's superfluous, start to eradicate from your life and see how much simpler life becomes.
And that's an excellent challenge. I'm going to work on it myself because I'm looking forward to my kids going off to college because then I can throw all the stuff out. I'm like, they're gone. I'm cleaning up. We don't need all of this crap in here.
I love it.
We're looking forward to that. So you have spent a lot of time talking to college campuses. My daughter is going to be going to college this fall. But before we talk about college, I'd like to talk about the new economy. Because I think things are shifting tremendously where they've said, I think in the next 10 or 20 years, half of the Fortune 500 companies won't exist anymore that are in the S&P 500.
Right.
More and more things are turning kind of to a gig economy. And if that's the end game, a gig economy, I guess the question is what do you see in the gig economy? And then we'll come back and talk about how does college relate to the gig economy?
Yeah, well, I agree wholeheartedly that we're moving to the gig economy. I think that in my circle of friends, I have more solopreneurs and contractors in my circle than I have employees. And that may be by design because I tend to commiserate with them and their plight and how they operate a little bit more closely than I do the friends of mine who go to work every day at 7:30 and they leave at 5:30 and that's their week in, week out. I think what's happening is we're starting to notice that we can buy services as needed. That it's not like I need this person because they're an amazing, all well-rounded person all around. I need someone who's really good at designing Facebook ad campaigns. I need someone who understands digital editing better than anyone I've ever met. And because I can go out and I can buy their chunks of their time, it makes it easier for me to do my job without having this really high overhead. And I think there is more and more of that coming down the road. You know, whether it's graphic design or video production or project management or coding and developing, I think companies are looking for experts in one area that they can leverage those skill sets without having to secure them as an employee, pay benefits, pay retirement, and all that good stuff. And I think we're on that path, Rocky. I think we'll have more and more solopreneurs in the next 5 to 10 years than imaginable.
There is still a tremendous ability to earn an income as a solopreneur, correct?
Oh my gosh. I have friends that they make more in a month than many other folks that are W-2 employees make all year. And I think that's part of the power of it is, and this ultimately kind of goes back to building a bigger life, not a bigger lifestyle. My cohort and partner in crime on the documentary that we did on student loan debt, this is a guy who routinely will say, hey, I'm going to bug out for 6 weeks and go climb mountains. And he goes and he couch surfs or he does Airbnb, different places, and he literally will climb a mountain. Last year, he spent 115 days climbing all the 14,000 foot peaks in the US, and he slept out of his Prius. That was his life, but he loved it. And he said the fact that I could pack all that stuff into my car was kind of monumental. And the fact that he didn't have a ton of expense waiting for him back at home. But as soon as he got back, he had all sorts of video projects that he could work on. There's some power in being a solopreneur in terms of having freedom and control of your schedule that being an employee does not afford you. And I think that, particularly to this next generation, the millennials and Gen Z, that's what they're after.
I think you're correct. So if that's what you're going after, is college worth it? Do you even have to go?
I love this question and I hate this question at the same time because there is a part of me that wants to say, absolutely, college is totally worth it. Everyone should experience that. Because I think there is something to going to school as a freshman, being in the dorms, getting to meet all of your dorm mates and suite mates, and making friendships at 10 o'clock p.m. and beyond, and having amazing philosophical conversations at 3 and 4 in the morning when you should be asleep and you have a test the next morning, but you don't care. That's an experience I think everyone should have. That being said, I feel like our college system has to go through a massive revolution for it to be valuable in the future. And by that, I mean, there really is no reason that a bachelor's degree in liberal arts, as an example, should take 4 years. Why are we pumping kids through a system that keeps them there longer and longer and longer when most of the classes they're taking, granted to make them well-rounded and give them a piece of the liberal education that's out there, but in reality, if they want to know humanities, they could get online and take a course about humanities on YouTube that may have the same effectiveness as it does sitting in class and listening from a lecturer. So I think we're changing, and I think there are schools that are responding, and I think the schools that don't respond will be closed in the next 10 years.
And I've actually seen some different schools, actually one that really popped up in our search, and it was funny because we got a postcard from them, and it didn't have the college name on it. What it basically had was a riddle, and you had to go to a website and kind of answer the logic puzzle. And then it gave you a second logic puzzle. And then after you answered the second logic puzzle correctly, did they tell you what the school was? And they're like, if you want to solve problems and learn things and be creative and you're willing to do it, here's who we are and what we do. And basically what they do, I think, is they don't have a traditional college campus. You spend 4 years across something like 11 different countries, and every 6 months you're moving to a new location and getting a whole new different experience.
Wow.
So, that was one opportunity that popped up. Unfortunately, it popped up very late for us because I think might have been something my daughter would have somewhat enjoyed. I don't know. She was somewhat keen to it. But there are a lot more types of things that are coming out now that are very different. And they're talking about, instead of going to college for, like you said, for 4 years, there's another program that I saw recently. You go for a month. Basically, what you learn in the month is the softer side of life. How to build relationships, how to meditation, and how to get into the flow. All the types of things that people take for granted and don't know. How to eat well, how to motivate yourself, how to do all of these other types of things that were never taught, but that are the keys to success.
One of the things that always surprises me, and it shouldn't, but it does, when I go on a college campus, one of the things that I talk about is how to negotiate your starting salary. And the students look at me as if I'm showing the caveman fire for the first time. They've never had the discussion. No one's brought it up. I'll ask point blank, have any of you talked about this in any of your classes? Not a hand goes up in the audience. This is the kind of life experience that I think, I'm biased, but I think would be way more effective than understanding the distance from the earth to the sun in parsecs in a stargazing class, but we're not teaching it. To your point, all those soft skills are incredibly important. I think it's also important to note that many times when I ask a student what it is they want to do, they'll say, well, I'm a finance major. And I'll say, that's not what I asked you. I asked, what do you want to do with your major? Or what do you want to do in life in general? And they'll come back to, well, I'm a finance major. And I think the reality is, hey, in 5 years, you will do nothing related to finance. And that just may be because it didn't fire you up, or your career took a different path, or whatever it may be. But to believe that what you studied is what you will do for the rest of your life is a ridiculous notion today. Because this generation coming through will have 5 different careers, not jobs, careers in their lifetime.
And I think along that same thing, a lot of people, who are you? I'm an attorney. I'm a doctor. I'm a businessman. No, you're not. You're a person. That's your job. And I think too often, because in the past, that is what your identity was. And then that's kind of what they taught at that. I think that they talk about that other college I'm talking about is, who are you as a person? Your identity is not your income or your job or your net worth. It's right. What is it that you truly want? How do you go about getting that? So you've been on a lot of campuses. I struggle with this question. Is Ivy League worth it? And I've come to the conclusion that for most people, it's not. For those people who don't have to pay for it, it is.
I would agree with that statement. I mean, I think if you've gone into an Ivy League and your parents are able to write the check, and that's not a big deal for you or them, and you know that you're there for the network, I think it's probably worth it. I think the networking and the connections that can be made on a campus like that are probably well worth it. That being said, I think if someone was really determined to, they could build those kind of networks and connections anywhere. And the way they would do that is similar to the way your daughter does it. She goes to conferences where wealthy and successful people attend. She meets them, and she's not afraid to meet them. So I think you could make the same kind of contacts as you would at an Ivy League. You just do it differently. So that's kind of my take on that.
And I agree with you. Actually, my kids are both on a robotics team. And so what you've got on these robotics teams are some of the brightest STEM kids in the country. They're all on social media now, which I could never do when I was a kid because there was no such thing. We could write a letter and put a stamp on it and send it across the nation. Of course, we didn't have robotics teams or these kinds of networks, but they're all on these social networks. And literally, these kids are chatting with kids who are going to every single Ivy League school, who are going to all the second tier schools, who are going to all the whatever schools. But they've already got a network across all the Ivy Leagues. Right. And so if they need an Ivy League connection, they can reach out to that massive network that they've built as high school kids 5 years from now and still connect and do. And so I think the power of the Ivy League network is becoming less and less if you are intentional in building your own network.
I couldn't agree more. I think one of the pieces of advice that I give that is far and away the most valuable is I tell students, build your Power 100 list. Build the 100 people in your life that like, love, and respect you, and then leverage that list when you want to do things or get a job or accomplish a project or whatever it may be. Those folks are willing to help. Those 100 people have 100 people in their life that like, love, and respect them. And so this is ultimately the power of LinkedIn. It is 6 degrees of separation, digitized and on steroids. And the larger your LinkedIn contact network, the more expansive your second and third degree levels of contacts are. So I think I have something like 5,200 LinkedIn contacts. It connects me with over 15 million people by my third level of contacts. And I know that I could reach out to virtually all of them and ask for some favor, and with a little bit of coercing, they would do it. If I need an introduction somewhere, I go straight to LinkedIn and figure out who do I know that knows someone that can get me there. And it works. The power of connection cannot be understated.
That's one of the foundations that we talk about, is building relationships. That is very much an important thing to do, and that's what opens your doors, and that's what gives you the ability. And with today's world, it is amazing how you can do that with very little effort.
Absolutely.
So, are your kids going to go to college, or you're not sure? Or like,
that's the $1 million question. I had this discussion with a friend of mine who owns a company in Silicon Valley. He had done a blog post about a machine learning class that's offered on Coursera. He said, hey, if anyone takes this $1,000 Coursera class on machine learning, I will give you a 6-figure income in my startup on our machine learning team. I reached out to him and I said, you can't be serious. And he said, I'm very serious. If I have someone that understands machine learning and AI and they go through this class, I'll get them on my team at a 6-figure salary in San Francisco. I told my kids that and then promptly signed them up for this machine learning class to see what would happen. I'm being facetious on that last part, but I am serious about giving them the opportunity to learn some of these things that then turn into jobs or opportunities later on. Whether or not it involves a college career is totally irrelevant to me. So in answer to your question, I want them to have some level of college experience, just to have the fun and meet the people and all of that. But again, very candidly, Rocky, if they don't graduate from college or even don't go at all, it's not the end of the world for me. I know they'll be successful with or without it.
For me, having just gone through this game for my daughter, I have come around to that attitude. She's going to go. She's going to see how it is for the year. And at the end of the year, she's going to have to determine whether it's worth it to continue. Because of her experience, we're doing something totally different with my son. For her, we had her go to conferences, build the soft skills, and do those types of things, because I don't think she'll ever work for a big company. And so I just wanted to have her have the skills that will create success regardless of the piece of paper. For my son, he's the STEM kid. And so what we actually have done is we've pulled him from high school from his last 2 years, and we're just going to send him to community college and let him start taking all of the courses for college. In the meantime, I signed him up for something called Treehouse. And Treehouse is basically a online learning for coding. I'm like, kid, just learn to code, start doing jobs. You don't even need to go to college. You can be making 50 grand when you're done with high school. And that's just the beginning.
Right.
You have the whole world in front of you. That's a backup plan. I mean, if he wants to probably go into engineering, if he goes into engineering, you need the degree, but we found a cheaper way to get him a degree. If he decides to go to computer science, I'm like, dude, you're wasting your time. Go take some cybersecurity classes and get to running. Why are you sitting around wasting your time going to college? Because you're not, the problem is, and we've seen this with robotics, the kids are working with 3D printers, CAD software, the latest, greatest of technology, and it keeps moving up incrementally. The problem is the college can't build a curriculum fast enough to keep up with tomorrow's technology.
Exactly.
So they're teaching skills that are no longer relevant. And my kids saw that because they would take their robot and they'd go visit colleges and they're like, hey, look at our robot. And they're playing with these little baby robots and the kids are laughing going, that's middle school. You guys are behind the times. But unfortunately, it takes that long. But now with programs like Coursera, you can get the latest, greatest, smartest stuff for $1,000 is the cost of one college class. And
Right.
you've got a 6-figure job.
Right. With your son, there's a community college not far from where I'm at in central Iowa. This is probably one of the most well-known programs in the country because it's one of the oldest. But they offer a 3-trimester, so it's 21 months long, course in optics. And what they're teaching is laser technology. So it's all about calibrating lasers, fixing lasers, how to measure with lasers, all of that. And the kids coming out of that program after 21 months, and it's like a $14,000 or $15,000 program, they're getting $80,000 to $100,000 jobs in research and in advanced manufacturing labs in California and Portland and various other places. That's what we're talking about. I think this is the shift, Rocky, when we talk about college, is that soon to be no longer will we go after that esteemed degree and that one thing that will be our benchmark thing. Like I'm a communications major, I'm a French literature major, or whatever. I think what kids will go to is, I got educated in a program that allowed me to go out and be employable in a field or industry that was needing employees. And I worked and I learned and I did what I needed to do. And now that I'm a little bit more advanced, now I'm in management. Now I'm a leader. Now I'm breaking off on my own and starting a company. And as a result, I think I need to take this class in entrepreneurship or accounting or whatever. So colleges will start to adjust their curriculum, I believe, to accommodate late 20s and early 30s and 40-year-olds who are coming back saying, I just need to tweak some of what I know because I'm in this new position and I think I could be a better leader or I could be a better project manager. So I need to get this accreditation for that. I think that's where we're headed.
So there's 2 parts to that. One is a certificate saying I'm accredited, and that I get.
Yep.
But the other half is, if I need to learn a skill, I don't think of a college as a place to learn a skill. For example, I want to learn marketing and I wanted to teach my daughter marketing. We bought Seth Godin's marketing class. It's $300, $400, $500. I forget the exact price. It's online. You're learning from a master marketer and you've got real-time communication with other people who are sharing their ideas and you're sharing your ideas, getting real-time feedback at the cutting edge. If I went to a marketing program, they'd be talking from a book that was 10 years old. Well, The ideas are 10 years old, but the new edition had one word change and is now $300.
Right.
And that's why I don't think of colleges as, I see them as certificate, like I need a piece of paper, not I need an education.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the tides are changing a bit in terms of the employers who are looking at a resume and saying, where's your degree from? Or, what did you study? I think today it's really more about experience. And there's a client of mine that's looking for a developer. And I've been in the room when they're going through the applications and the resumes. They don't pay any attention whatsoever to degree or university or program. It's all about, we need PHP, C++. They need to be efficient with Ruby. That's all they're looking at. They could care less about the accreditation or the pedigree. They just want to know, how much experience does this person have? And can you show it off? Can I go to all the software that you've written or the websites you've built? And if you can prove that, you've pretty much got a job.
And that's what Treehouse does. They literally teach you all those different languages. They create a repository for you and they allow you to showcase, kind of like an artist showcases their work. They create this showcase of your coding skills so that you can go out and say, hey, I do all of those things.
That's awesome.
It's an amazing program. We'll see what happens. Motivating a 15-year-old boy is a whole nother story. So let's talk about the opposite side of this. And I actually had on an episode Brian Brandau, he was in massive debt. He got out of it. And now he's actually doing kind of a little bit of what you're doing, but on a much lower scale. He's trying to teach financial literacy in his school system, and he showed your movie, Broke, Busted, and Disgusted.
Nice.
Which is about student debt. And this is what happens when you don't listen to us and you just go out and follow the normal path, right?
Correct.
So what is that movie all about, and what did you showcase?
Well, in my many years of going to college campuses, the conversation was largely the same. I would ask students, how much will you have when you graduate in student loans? And how much will your payment be? The majority of the time, and I would say not 9 out of 10, but maybe 6, 7 out of 10 students would have zero clue how much they had borrowed thus far. And they had even less clue about what those payments would be when translated after graduation. And it got me wondering, if you don't know how much you've borrowed and you have no idea what your payments are going to be, how can you effectively build a budget, negotiate your starting salary, figure out what life's going to be like? Because the majority of the time, a student will graduate and 6 months later, they start making payments on their student loans. Well, by that time, they may have lifestyled up into the car and the apartment and all the stuff they can no longer afford. So I wanted to write a book because that had been my business model, was write a book, go speak on the book, do it for 2 years, wash, rinse, repeat. And I presented the idea to a friend of mine. I said, I have this idea for a book. It's called Broke, Busted, and Disgusted, True Tales of Student Loan Borrowers. And I wanted to feature hero stories and horror stories, those students who had gotten out scot-free or who had paid off their debt in record time, and then those who were mired in debt and weren't living the life that they knew they could. And he said, Adam, that would be a killer documentary. And I said, yeah, it would be a killer documentary. I don't know the first thing about making a documentary, unfortunately. And he said, yeah, me neither. Let's go do it. And this is the guy I mentioned before who's climbed mountains and slept in his car and all of that. He just tackles projects. When we started really brainstorming what this thing would look like, we figured out that we could probably crowdfund to fund it. And we did a 45-day crowdfunding campaign, raised $67,000, and started shooting, editing, and producing this documentary that ended up getting picked up by CNBC. And it's shown in hundreds of high schools and community colleges and colleges across the country. And today has kind of created its own movement and curriculum within the educator base. So I feel very fortunate to have done it. And it's one of those things that I hold as kind of the pinnacle of my career thus far.
And I've watched the movie. I've shown it to my kids. I've made them watch it as well. Because, I've told them if you're smart enough to go to college, you're smart enough to pay for college. And I'll tell you, sitting in these financial aid seminars at the schools, and talking to the financial aid people, nobody talks about payments. No one talks about the return on investment of your college. They're like, oh, just sign these papers. Oh, you get, as part of your award package, you get these loans, all of these loans. And here's some extra loans, and just sign all this stuff. And I listen to the parents' questions, and I'm like, oh my God, I feel so bad for you, and I feel even worse for your kid because neither of you have any financial sense. And you're giving away your retirements, and you're strangling your kids with debt. It's not going to be a pretty ending. And yet, nobody, it's just like, this is normal. This is how we do it. And it's amazing.
It really is. I don't know what you would call it, but there's almost like this blind faith in that if you do this, everything will work out fine. I did this TED Talk several years ago at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. The whole message was around, or the way I started the talk ultimately was, imagine being 18 and being told, go pick out a house to live in. And it can be any size house you want, big, small. If it's a 4-bedroom home that you really are attracted to, buy that thing, fix it up, put furniture in it. We'll give you a loan, no questions asked. And then 4 years later, they go, oh, by the way, this debt that you've acquired for this home, it has no equity. You can't trade it. You can't sell it. The only thing you can do is pay it off. And oh, by the way, if you bought in a bad neighborhood, too bad. And if you bought a 4-bedroom home in a gated community and you should have bought a 1-bedroom condo, too bad. This is the arrangement that we're setting people up for. And we have to begin questioning the logic of how much am I taking on in order to get a degree in something that I'm not really sure I want to do for my life, and not look at the ROI on all of that.
And how often do they change their degrees as they go through? You start in one thing and you end up coming out another place. We had someone on from Nitro College. Have you ever heard of them?
I have not.
So they have a calculator on their site. It's called Nitro Score. And you pick your school and you pick your major, and it literally shows you what your expected salary is coming out and how much money you're going to have to pay in college loans. And it's literally got this circle from red to green. And it's like your college choice and major is highly in the red. You're screwed. Or, hey, your college major, and because of the scholarships you're getting and all of that stuff, it's a good choice. And it literally lays it out within 2 minutes of work.
Oh, it's so smart. I mean, I think there's tools like that now that will tell you what major, the percentage of certain majors, the likelihood of you getting a job in food service. Which is a really depressing thing, but there's some major, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it was like 63% of people in this major were likely to have a job in food service, and basically being service industry folks.
And you don't need a college degree to do that.
No.
That is a shame. So while we're on the subject of debt, after they get out and they have all this student debt, they end up with mortgage debt. Can you enlighten us a little bit about what you're working on with mortgage debt?
Yeah, and I appreciate you asking, Rocky. My career trajectory took me through this path where I was in the mortgage business for about 5 years. I learned a great deal about credit and debt and mortgages and credit scores. And one of the things that I gleaned from all of that, having had a number of clients sign their truth in lending disclosure, which you probably are aware of, some of your audience may not be, but the truth in lending disclosure is that document that you sign that says, if you pay for 30 years on this mortgage, this is actually how much you'll pay. And if you pay close attention to that document, it's typically, depending on the interest rate, over 30 years, about double what you've borrowed. So if you're living, or if you borrowed a $300,000 mortgage, you're likely to pay somewhere between $550,000 and $600,000 over 30 years' time. And one of the things that I found in all of my research and searching was a strategy or a philosophy of how to shred debt quickly. And the way you do that is you're leveraging any extra discretionary money against the long-term debt that you have on that mortgage. What happens is when you're making lump sum payments to your mortgage principal, the interest amount is also cut drastically down. So I can show people through a piece of software that I white label called shredmymortgage.com. I'm teaching people now how to get rid of their mortgage in record time. Record time, I'm talking well under 10 years. Most people, it's somewhere between 4 and 7. My wife and I almost completely eradicated ours in 3 years' time. And what it did, in all honesty, Rocky, was it allowed us to live a bigger life because we didn't have that debt and those payments hanging over our head, but we still had access to the money because the access is the equity that we hold in our home available through a home equity line. So when we buy a new car, we write a check off the home equity line and our money goes right back in to fill in that home equity line. We end up paying off new vehicles in 4 or 5 months instead of 72, which radically reduces the amount of interest that we pay. So all in all, what I'm trying to do and teach people how to do is to own more of their income. And what I mean by that is if you make a certain amount every single 2 weeks or month-long period, I want you to look really closely at how much of that income do you actually own versus how much is going out to pay interest to a bank or a credit union. Because when the money goes out in interest, you no longer own that money, someone else does. And I maintain that the majority of people out there are probably living on about 60% of what they make on average, maybe less. And that's after you take out income taxes. So the actual amount of money that is yours that you work for is very, very minimal. and we're going to do our best to increase that.
And that's why people live paycheck to paycheck, because it basically means that there's nothing left at the end of the month for them.
Exactly.
To live the life they want.
And I encourage your listeners to do this. The next drive across town, count how many banks, how many credit unions, how many other financial institutions that exist and have built new buildings and increasing their physical footprint, despite the fact that most people are going digital with their banking. I mean, the banks are making money hand over fist, and I don't begrudge them. I don't vilify them, but it is a business model that we all as a society have bought into, and it keeps most people exactly where they are, which is broke.
And I think that is one of the nooses that hold people back from freedom, and that's debt. If you don't have debt and you don't have a mortgage and you don't have a car payment, you have a ton of free cash flow to do whatever you want to do. And you have the ability to do it. And I think, unfortunately, people make small choices. Oh, it's only $100 a month. Oh, it's only this, only it's a little bit extra. And those small choices add up over time, just like the compound interest curve. And the next thing you know, at one point, you're like, oh my God, how did I get here? And it wasn't made with big decisions. It was made with a lot of tiny little decisions.
Exactly.
Putting you further and further behind.
Yeah, we try and minimize our payment load down to the absolute minimum, meaning when we do online banking and we're paying our bills, there's probably 3 or 4 that we pay a month, and that's it. I've met people who say, oh my gosh, I spend 3 hours a week writing out bills and making sure all my things are paid. And it's like, isn't that tiresome? Isn't that does that just drain you of energy? For us, it's a super simple 10 minutes once a week. It's taken care of, and the rest is all automated. That's how it should be.
Yeah, most of my bills, I think, are automated. My credit cards and the utilities and all that stuff is just all on, pay it when it's supposed to get done. And then you just have to sit down, and I use software to track everything so I know where my money's going, and I can always look back and see how it's flowing and whether I'm happy or unhappy with the flow.
Yeah.
And then we can make changes going forward. But absolutely, where you put your time and intention, where you watch and where you measure is where you get results. So if you want results with your money, you've got to spend the time to watch it and measure it.
Indeed.
We've talked about a lot of different subjects. Is there anything else that we should touch on today that we haven't gotten to yet?
The one thing, we had talked about this a little bit pre-interview about what's something we could leave your audience with, a challenge. And my challenge is this, because I think it fits into everything we've talked about. I want you to figure out really how much of your income you own. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to take all of your monthly expenses and disregard the things that are just monthly, like utilities and groceries and all of that. That's an expense of living. But the car loans and the student loans and the credit card debt and the mortgage, I want you to add up all those payments. And then I want you to look at the bills and separate out how much goes to interest and how much goes to principal. And when you start to really drill down into those numbers, you'll begin to realize just how little of your income you actually own and how much income the bank owns. And if you want to build a bigger life, not a bigger lifestyle, the amount of income that you own has to be greater than the amount the bank owns by double the margin. And when you have that much discretionary money every month, paying for college is not a challenge. Paying for a big vacation is not a challenge. Having to pay for a new roof or brakes on the car is not a challenge. Payment yourself to death, all those things become very challenging. So I would encourage your listeners to go out and figure out how much of their income do they actually own versus how much do they pay out to a bank. And then let's get really serious about owning more of your income through using a software like Shred My Mortgage or just budgeting really intently.
I think that's an excellent challenge. And hopefully people already know where their money's flowing if they've been listening to this show. But if you don't, here is another opportunity for you to go ahead and do that and look at your expenses and see what they are. And I think that is very true. When you don't have debt and you don't have payments, you have tremendous amount of cash flow. And You can handle whatever you want to handle, or you can build up a massive pile of savings, which allows you the ability to do what some of your friends are doing, which is, I'm going to take 6 weeks off and go do whatever, and then I'll come back and do a little bit of work or do whatever it is that I choose to do to live a happy life. And I think it's possible, and you're hearing the stories. This is possible. You just have to make the choice to bring it about and make it happen.
I have one more quick thing I want to share, Rocky, if you're okay with it.
Yes.
So in this great game of building a bigger life and not a bigger lifestyle, one of my big, hairy, audacious goals out there has been to live in Italy for a period of time. Say, call it 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks. We've been building up to figure out when can we do this. And so we just started as a family looking at the VRBOs and Airbnbs that are available. So next summer, we have a 6-week vacation planned where or call it staycation if you want, but we are moving to a city off the Amalfi Coast in Italy. And we started looking at these places, and there are beautiful ocean view properties that are just absolutely pristine. And we're going to go live in one of those for a month and then spend the next 2 weeks traveling to Paris and various other places. We could not do that unless we built the life that we've built for ourselves. And it's possible. And I want to share that story to let other people know it's possible, that it's not a pipe dream, that you can do it. You just have to plan it. And the kicker on all this is our airfare will largely be free because we're doing it on miles. The stay for the month is being covered by one speaking engagement that I'm doing later this month. So we're writing a check for the entire month of stay off of one engagement. And it's not going to be this major spendy kind of vacation. We're going to do it. We're going to cook. We're going to have fun there. But we just want to experience life as Italians for an extended period of time. So I hope in sharing that, don't mean to boast or brag about it. Just use that as motivation that you can do anything you set your mind to.
You can. We spent almost 3 weeks in Italy last summer, and we went around. We went to the Amalfi Coast, and we went to a bunch of other places as well. I will tell you, have you been to the Amalfi Coast?
I have not.
Okay, the road in is scary. It's on the side of a mountain, literally up on the ledge. And then once you get there, nothing's flat. So these people are climbing up and down steps, which is why I say you have to have your health, or you're not going to be able to get up and down all those little alleyways and steps that are in Italy.
Yes.
It is absolutely beautiful. It's a wonderful place. It is very touristy. So I don't know how many Italians you're going to meet. You'll meet lots of tourists depending on where you go in that area, but it's absolutely a blast. That sounds like a wonderful, fun trip for you.
Yeah, it's going to be a great time.
So if people would like to learn more and connect with you, where's the best place for them to find you?
Well, if you're interested in my musings on money, because I do quite a bit of pontificating about that, you can find my blog at masteryofmoney.com. I'd heard a speaker one time say we should all be in pursuit of mastery of something. So I chose Mastery of Money. If you go to masteryofmoney.com. And then more information about me, including the documentary and my TED Talks and all of that, you can find at Adam Carroll, AdamCarroll.info. So adamcarroll.info is my site.
And thank you for sharing. We'll put those in the show notes so people can find you.
Perfect.
Was an honor to have you here today, and I'm so grateful that you could join us.
Rocky, thanks for doing what you do, man. This has been fun.
Wow, so many nuggets in this episode. I really enjoyed talking with Adam, and I love how he is helping so many people get it right with money. You have to be intentional. The world is changing, and the advice that worked for me doesn't apply anymore. I can't keep carrying those ideas. It's time to put them down, like the monk did with the woman. Just like we talked about, it's harder to keep wealth than it is to make it. Once you come up with a system to create wealth, you need to come up with a system to keep it. Take the time to do Adam's challenge. Figure out how much of your income you own. What are all your monthly payments for loans, and how much of that is interest? If you need help or have a question, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be happy to answer them for you. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and family. Also, don't forget, we have a new Facebook group for Richer Soul. I'd be honored to have you join us so we can continue the conversation. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals? Just email me, and we can start with a short chat to even see if we're a good fit. You can reach me at rocky@richersoul.com. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I have shared has helped you. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.